The clinking of silverware was the only sound in the room. No laughter, no chatter, not even the rustle of casual conversation. Just silence, thick and heavy, like a blanket no one dared to pull off. I sat at the long oak table, my fingers gripping the edge of my napkin, watching my husband stare at his plate. Across from me, his sisters glanced nervously at one another, their smiles tight and careful, as though they were trying not to breathe too loudly. At the head of the table sat my father-in-law, shoulders squared, jaw set, surveying the room like a general at war. His presence alone dictated every movement, who spoke, who stayed quiet, when we all could laugh. I noticed how the kids fidgeted restlessly but didn't dare speak. My husband's youngest brother, barely out of college, looked like he was holding back a question but swallowed it instead. Everyone seemed to shrink a little smaller in their chairs, as though invisibility might keep them safe. It was my third family dinner since marrying into this family, and by now I recognized the pattern. The night always began this way, a kind of quiet dread that hung over the table. This wasn't just a meal. It was a performance. A test. A reminder of who held the power in the room. And as I watched my husband's shoulders curve inward, I felt a pang of something sharp, sadness, yes, but also a flicker of anger. This was the man I loved, the man who laughed freely with me at home, who dreamed big dreams when no one was listening. But here he was a shadow of himself. Something inside me whispered that this couldn't go on forever. The silence stretched until my father-in-law finally spoke, not to start a conversation, but to deliver judgment. "So," he said, his voice low but sharp, "how's that little project of yours going?" He didn't need to name it. Everyone knew he was talking about my husband's small business, the one he had left a stable corporate job to build. My husband cleared his throat. "It's going well. We just signed a new client last week." "A client?" His father snorted, setting his fork down with a clang that made everyone flinch. "One client doesn't feed a family. You should have stayed at your old job. At least then you had a real paycheck, not this hobby." The word hobby hit like a slap. I saw my husband's face fall, just slightly, the quick downward flicker of his eyes, the way his shoulders hunched in, as if he could make himself smaller. He didn't argue. He never did. No one did. My heart thudded in my chest. I wanted to reach across the table and take his hand, to shield him from the sting of those words. But more than that, I felt a rush of something fierce and unfamiliar, a quiet kind of outrage. I looked around the table. No one spoke. His sisters kept their heads down. His brother stared at his plate. Even the kids sensed it and went still. This was how it always went, I realized. His father spoke, everyone absorbed the blow, and the night moved on. No one dared to disrupt the ritual. But tonight, something inside me wouldn't let it slide. This wasn't just another dinner. This was the moment I realized I couldn't keep watching the man I love be diminished in front of the people who should lift him up. My chest tightened, not from fear but from resolve. I wasn't going to yell or make a scene. But I also wasn't going to let this pass in silence. I took a breath. I knew the next words I spoke would change everything. I set my fork down gently, the sound soft but loud enough to draw every pair of eyes at the table. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears, but my voice, to my own surprise, was steady. "Can I say something?" I asked. The room froze. No one usually interrupted my father-in-law, not mid-lecture. His eyebrows rose, just a fraction, but he didn't speak. I took a slow breath. "I know you care about this family. And I know you want your son to succeed." My voice was calm, almost too calm for the way I felt inside. "But the way you speak to him, it doesn't push him forward. It just tears him down." No one moved. Even the kids stopped fidgeting. My father-in-law's jaw tightened. "I'm just telling the truth. Someone has to." I nodded, meeting his eyes. "Yes, but there's a way to tell the truth without making the person you love feel small. He's working so hard. He's building something. And every time you call it a hobby, you take away a little of the pride he's earned. I reached under the table and squeezed my husband's hand. His fingers felt tense, but he didn't pull away. My voice softened. I know you see yourself as strong. And you are. But real strength isn't about making people afraid to speak. It's about making them feel safe to be themselves. The table was silent. I could feel everyone's shock, the unspoken "did she just say that?" hanging in the air. I expected him to explode, to tell me I was out of line. Instead, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't seem so big, so untouchable. For a long moment, my father-in-law didn't say a word. He just sat there, his fork untouched, staring at me as if weighing whether to strike back or stand down. Then, something changed. His shoulders, usually squared like a soldier's, seemed to lower just a little. His eyes, sharp and commanding a second ago, softened. "You think I make him feel small?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. No one at the table breathed. "Yes," I said gently. "Not because you mean to hurt him, but because you think being hard on him will make him stronger." But it doesn't. It just makes him doubt himself. He looked at his son, my husband, who still hadn't spoken. My husband finally lifted his eyes, and in them I saw something raw, something he'd probably kept hidden for years. "That true?" his father asked, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. My husband hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, Dad. I've always wanted you to be proud of me. But I never knew if you were." The words hung in the air like a confession. For the first time since I'd known him, my father-in-law's face softened completely. He looked down at his plate, then back at us. "I thought I was pushing you to be better," he said, almost like he was speaking to himself. "That's how my father treated me. I thought it was love." "It is love," I said gently. "But love can sound different. It can sound like encouragement. Like faith. Like pride." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening just a bit. "I didn't know I was doing that. I didn't know I was scaring everyone." Then, the most shocking moment of all, he turned to my husband. "I'm sorry, son." The table went utterly still. I think everyone forgot to breathe. His sisters exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even the kids froze, as if witnessing something historic. And in that moment, the man who had ruled the family with fear no longer felt like a tyrant. He felt human. For a few seconds, the whole room was silent, not the heavy silence we started with, but the kind that feels like the first breath after a storm. My husband blinked, clearly holding back tears, then gave a small, almost shy smile. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." His father nodded and, in a gesture that surprised everyone, reached across the table and put his hand on his son's. "I am proud of you," he said, his voice steady but thick. "I just didn't know how to say it." Something broke open in the room. His sister smiled, relieved. The kids started giggling softly, the tension that had sat over them all dinner had finally lifted. And then, almost like a dam bursting, conversation returned. Someone cracked a joke about dessert, and soon there was real laughter around the table, the kind that felt unforced, natural. I looked at my husband. He was sitting taller now, shoulders back, as if a weight had been taken off him. His hand squeezed mine under the table. Not nervously this time, but gratefully. As we all stood up later to clear the dishes, I caught my father-in-law watching me. He gave a small nod, not of dominance, but of respect. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged at this table. Driving home that night, my husband turned to me and said softly, "You changed something tonight. For me. For all of us." I smiled and shook my head. "No. We changed something. You found your voice. Your dad found his heart. I just helped start the conversation." And as the night sky stretched above us, I thought about how sometimes the most powerful act isn't shouting or fighting, it's speaking the truth with love. One conversation, one moment of courage, had shifted an entire family. And in that quiet car ride home, I realized something important. Sometimes, dethroning a king doesn't mean tearing him down. It means showing him how to lead with kindness,